February 2015. The frigid air enveloped High Street, Columbus, Ohio, as industrial lights shone down on the freshly drilled concrete. From a depth of nearly 3 meters, a metallic object gleamed in the mud. A wedding ring engraved with R&L 1977. "Hold position, D," Laura Dean said quickly, her voice echoing in the eerily silent space. What began as a routine annual evidence sweep by the cold case unit had now become something entirely different, something that would answer the questions haunting Columbus for over 3 decades. Beneath the High Street sewer, they didn't just find metal and cement, they found evidence of a story the city thought it had forgotten. Lena Harper, 25 years old, left her small home in the Clintonville neighborhood after an argument with her husband. Neighbors heard the car door slam, the sound of metal falling, then silence. The next morning, Lena didn't show up at school. When her sister came to the house, the lights were still on, the door locked, the house deathly quiet. The family called the police. From that moment, the name Lena Harper was no longer just one woman's. It became a generational obsession in the heart of the city. For many years, the Columbus police scoured every street, every riverbank, every lake in the area, but found nothing but rumors and despair. Kodak film photos, handwritten notes, vague statements about a green pickup, all sank into oblivion when the case was closed with the notation, "Sewer not opened." Time passed. The Harper family home was sold, the neighborhood changed, and the case file lay dormant in a cold metal cabinet for 35 years, reduced to a number on the cover, #1980-0214. But in 2015, when Detective Laura Dean of the Cold Case Unit decided to revisit old files to test new DNA technology, she discovered a small detail that an entire generation of investigators before her had overlooked. That small discovery set off an unexpected chain of events, leading to the finding of a man who had worked right in the High Street construction area in 1980, where the police dogs had lost the scent. The excavation wasn't just to find remains, it was a journey to unearth the past, confront mistakes, and the silence that had lasted over 30 years. Because when Columbus finally touched the truth, the answer didn't come from a drifter, but from someone the whole community knew, someone who had dined with the victim's family, attended memorials for the very woman he had helped bury. The Lena Harper case wasn't just a mystery solved, but a testament to the power of forensic technology, the persistence of investigators who refused to give up, and the belief that justice can be delayed, but never disappears. This is also a story about a community having to confront its own memories, where old houses, seemingly peaceful streets, hide secrets no one dares touch. Tonight, we will return to the winter of 1980, the night Lena Harper disappeared, trace the decades-long investigation, and witness the moment when the truth emerges from the cold concrete beneath the city. This is a story of loss, perseverance, betrayal, and buried justice, but never forgotten. Before diving deep into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to not miss the latest cases. The night of February 3, 1980, the Clintonville neighborhood, north of Columbus, was blanketed in thick snow, and the faint yellow glow of streetlights filtering through bare trees. At the small house number 214 on East Como Street, arguing voices rose above the howling wind through the windows. Lena Harper, 25, an elementary school teacher at Indian Springs, had just stormed out of the living room in anger. Her husband, Richard Harper, tried to call after her, his voice hoarse. "Where are you going in this weather?" The response was the slam of the door and a thick silence. Neighbors later reported hearing vague arguing, then the slam of a car door, followed by metal clanging hard against something, a chilling sound in the quiet winter night. When they peeked through the curtains, they only saw the hallway light at the Harper house still on, casting a weak glow onto the snow. No one thought it would be the last time Lena Harper was seen alive. The next morning, snow still falling lightly, school opened late due to icy roads. The principal called the Harper home because Lena hadn't come to class or called in sick. The phone rang multiple times, no one answered. At 10 a.m., her sister, Maggie Harper, came knocking. The door was locked from inside, curtains half drawn, kitchen lights still on. Inside, no sounds except the steady ticking of the clock. Maggie called her sister's name a few times, walked around the house, saw old shoe prints on the path, but half covered by snow, direction unclear. Lena's Ford Pinto was still parked in the garage. A coffee cup on the kitchen table was cold, an unwashed cereal bowl, a gray wool scarf draped over a chair. No signs of voluntary departure. Coat, wallet, spare keys still there. Richard appeared at the stairs, looking tired and dazed, saying Lena went out for a walk to clear her head after last night's argument, and she'll probably come back. But outside it was -12 degrees wind chill. No one walks in thick night snow without a coat or gloves. By early afternoon, snow thickening, wind bending the wooden fence behind the house, clattering like the rhythm of waiting. Maggie looked at the wall clock. The minute hand just past 3, and she knew she couldn't wait anymore. At 4:27 p.m., Maggie Harper called 911, her voice trembling, words halting. "Police, I need to report a missing person. My sister, Lena Harper, disappeared last night. Door locked, car still at home, but she's nowhere to be found." The dispatcher asked back, trying to stay calm. "Any signs of a struggle or break-in, ma'am?" Maggie replied, "No, everything looks normal. Too normal. But my sister would never leave like that." When the call ended, police sirens echoed through the empty street, red and blue lights reflecting off the icy road. Neighbors peeked through curtains, watching patrol cars stop in front of the Harper house. Patrol cars turned onto East Como Street, snow already nearly 4 inches thick. The night shift sergeant reported over radio. No signs of break-in, house still locked from inside. Right the next morning, the Franklin County Crime Investigation Team received the missing person report and assigned Lieutenant Frank Riley, with over 10 years of experience in domestic violence cases, as lead. He arrived at the scene at 8:15 a.m., dark coat soaked with snow, old leather notebook tucked under his arm. The Harper family home was preliminarily sealed with yellow tape. Riley stepped over the threshold, pausing to observe every detail. Living room tidy, no signs of struggle. On the wooden table near the window was a dried coffee cup, next to the Columbus Dispatch newspaper dated February 3rd, folded at the local news page. Kitchen clean, sink with only a half-eaten cereal bowl. At the corner of the dining table, Riley spotted a handwritten note in blue ink, the beginning of an unfinished message. "I'll come back to talk when." The writing abruptly stopped mid-sentence, as if interrupted. The paper had faint fingerprints, right corner stained with candle wax. He carefully placed it in a sealed envelope. Inside the fireplace, ashes still fresh, not fully cooled. Riley used metal tongs to pull out a few paper scraps. Seeing mixed in were bits of cardboard and scorched ink, likely remnants of a letter or document. Near the back door, he bent down, spotting a muddy shoe print of half a foot, large size, with serrated sole edges, not matching Richard's shoes that police had checked. He measured it, took Polaroid photos, then dusted with powder to record. When checking upstairs, Riley noted the bed undisturbed, Lena's suitcases and clothes still in the closet, along with all jewelry and personal wallet. No signs anyone had packed to leave. The emptiness in the house made him think of missing persons cases with cover-up elements, something his long experience made him wary of. By 10 a.m., Richard Harper was invited to the living room for preliminary questioning. The 30-year-old man, tall and thin, wearing a gray sweater, eyes weary. He stated that last night they argued about Lena's job transfer, and afterward, she went out to clear her head. When Riley asked specifically when Lena left the house, Richard said, around 10:30. However, neighbors reported hearing noises near 2 a.m. Riley noted in his notebook, time discrepancy. He asked further, "Did you go look for her?" Richard slowly replied, "I thought she'd come back. We often argue and make up. Did you call anyone that night?" Richard shook his head, but the local phone records obtained by police showed an outgoing call at 2:14 a.m., lasting only 26 seconds. When Riley asked about this call, Richard said, "Maybe I tried calling a friend, don't remember clearly." His voice even and cold, no emotion shown. Riley observed his hands closely. Clean, no scratches, short nails. He noticed Richard avoided looking at the sealed paper police had just collected from the dining table. In Riley's mind, the pieces were starting to not fit. Wife disappears in the cold night. Door locked from inside. Car still there, but husband shows no panic. That afternoon, a search team was formed. Riley commanded 12 officers and 2 police dogs, divided into 3 groups, starting from High Street intersection, extending toward the Olentangy River. The area had many ongoing constructions, underground pipes and unfinished concrete bridges, complex terrain, easy to hide traces. He ordered a manual search map, each team marking areas with wooden stakes and red paint. In the report sent to superiors that day, Riley wrote, "No signs victim left voluntarily. Need to cross-check all people exiting the neighborhood from 8 p.m. to 3 a.m. Possibility of criminal act in house or within 2-mile radius." As dusk fell, snow began falling again, blurring the search team's initial footprints. Riley stood by the patrol car, watching house number 214 sink into the gray of twilight. The kitchen lights still on, just like when Lena Harper was last seen. He knew this wouldn't be a simple woman leaves after argument. Something had happened in that quiet house, and its traces were being buried under the winter snow. The next day, the official file was opened with code hash 1980214, classified suspicious missing person case. In the first line of the minutes, Riley wrote succinctly 3 words, bold and decisive strokes, "Not voluntary departure." The morning of the second day after Lena Harper's disappearance, snow melted into thin mud, covering the sidewalks. Lieutenant Frank Riley and the search team returned to the scene early, bringing 2 police dogs trained specifically for missing person. One of them, named Max, a German shepherd with seniority in many Columbus police cases. Riley gave it Lena's wool scarf to sniff. The dog inhaled deeply, whined softly, then began leading, nose close to the ground, tail wagging lightly. Max's path led through the Harper backyard, around the wooden fence, and along a small alley connecting to High Street. Snow here was compacted, indicating foot traffic on the night of disappearance. Max paused near a streetlight pole, barked softly, then continued south, where the sewer repair construction managed by Franklin Public Works was. Riley followed, noting quickly in his notebook, "Sent direction, High Street, construction area." Upon nearing the construction barriers, the search team discovered large tire tracks in the mud, deep and fresh patterns, likely truck or pickup. Riley bent to measure with a metal ruler, axle spacing, matching Ford F-100 or Chevrolet C-10, common for construction workers then. Right next to the tire tracks, one officer found a small beige button half-caked in mud, plastic material, dark brown stitching. Riley carefully picked it with steel tweezers, placed in a sealed bag, labeled, "Found near construction fence." 8:42 a.m. He stood silently watching the metal fence rattling in the wind. Inside were unfinished concrete sewer sections, stacked steel pipes, and overlapping tire marks. No workers that morning, due to thick snow, but keep-out signs were tilted, with unusually large boot prints. Max circled the area once more, scent seeming to vanish at the fence edge. The dog stopped, barked 3 times, then turned to look at Riley as if awaiting command. That was the signal the scent ended here, possibly victim transported by vehicle. The search team expanded along High Street to the intersection with Arcadia Avenue. A local supermarket, Reed's Grocery, at the corner with a large parking lot. Riley met the manager, asked about night shifts or anything unusual seen. The manager, Mr. Reed, shook his head. "We close at 10 that night, heavy snow, no one around." Riley asked about security cameras, but Reed just smiled sadly. "It's 1980, security cameras only at banks, sir." Returning to the construction site, Riley had the entire area photographed with Kodak 35mm film, then marked on a 1/5000 scale paper map the locations of traces, tire tracks, button, tilted fence. He also ordered the tech team to use tape measure for distance from Harper House to fence, 0.73 miles. All recorded in preliminary report. Police dog scent ends at High Street construction. Evidence beige button, unidentified pickup tire marks. Assume victim may have been moved from scene by vehicle. That afternoon, when Riley returned to the Harper house, he caught Richard smoking on the porch, eyes sunken, detached look. Riley asked, "Do you know anyone working at the High Street construction?" Richard looked up, shook his head. "No, but maybe Lena knows some from the public works. She often teaches workers' kids." The answer caught Riley's attention. He noted, possible construction link via school. That night, Riley arranged all photos and maps on his small office desk. Under dim neon light, he placed 3 photos side by side: Harper House, alley leading road and construction fence. Between them was a gap, exactly where Lena's scent disappeared. He dotted a red pen on the map, drawing a thin line from 214 East Como to the sewer area. That straight line was just over a kilometer. But in Riley's mind, it was like a link between two worlds, where a woman vanished and where all traces stopped. He leaned back in his chair, took a drag on his cigarette, smoke mingling with the hazy white light. The last line in that day's report he wrote in even strokes: "First lead identified, High Street construction. Continue gathering personnel and vehicle access info for area." Outside the window, snow still fell silently, covering the tire tracks he had photographed that morning. Riley knew, when the sun rose, all would be erased, leaving only the Kodak film photo, and the feeling he was very close to a secret buried under winter mud. 2 days after the police dogs lost the scent at the High Street construction site, snow still lay in thick layers, but the atmosphere at the Columbus police station was heavier than ever. Lieutenant Frank Riley returned to East Como Street early morning, determined to expand the investigation scope. He understood well, missing persons cases seeming voluntary departure often hid more sophisticated crimes, and each passing hour, the chance of finding a survivor diminished. Riley went door to door around the neighborhood, recording residents' statements. Most said they slept soundly that night, heard nothing but wind. But at the end of the block, Mrs. Doreen Wells, 62, provided the first piece. She recounted, around 2:20 a.m., waking to thunder, she looked out the window and saw a dark green pickup driving slowly down the street. "I remember clearly, because one taillight was dim, flickering weakly. 2 people in the truck. I didn't see faces, but they seemed to look around like afraid of being spotted." Riley asked details on direction, and she replied, "It turned toward High Street, the construction side." That detail stunned Riley, perfectly matching where the dogs had picked up Lena's scent. Back at the station, Riley had the clerk print a list of all green pickups registered in Franklin County from 1978 to early 1980. The long paper list, black ink smudged from dot matrix printer, listed 46 vehicles. He marked each line, checking addresses, types, plates, and owners. Mostly farmers, electricians, workers, none with Clintonville address or under Harper name. However, one line made Riley pause his pen: Caleb Rowe, construction engineer, Franklin Public Works, owns Ford F-100, dark green. Rowe worked primarily at the High Street construction, the exact area where the search team found the button and tire tracks. Riley called the Franklin Public Works office. The manager confirmed Rowe had night shifts early February, but took unexplained leave morning of February 5, 1980, right when Lena disappeared. He said sick, but no doctor's note, the manager said. Riley noted in book, Rowe, suspicious. Linked to Harper? To check possible connection, Riley began examining the Harpers' lives. He went to the bank where Lena had her salary account, requested copies of last 3 months' statements. The young teacher earned about $800 a month, but recently withdrew cash frequently, hundreds each time, no purpose noted. In contrast, the joint account with Richard Harper was in deep debt, $2,500 loan, overdue credit cards, and constant car repairs. From Lena's colleagues, Riley learned she complained Richard, unemployed nearly a year, spending on small business projects unclear. A friend of hers, Marianne, said Lena planned to move to Cleveland for a new job, but Richard wouldn't let her, they argued fiercely. Those details made Riley feel clearly this wasn't a woman runs away case. All signs pointed to conflict and financial secrets. That afternoon, back at the station, he requested the interlocal communications department to check Harper home phone records. At the time, data not auto-saved, all late-night calls hand-logged by switchboard operators. After nearly an hour searching, they brought Riley a faint carbon paper roll, showing clearly February 3, 2:14 a.m. Outgoing call, 26 seconds, recipient unidentified. Riley read and reread the 2:14 a.m. number. 6 minutes later, per witness, the green pickup appeared, leaving the neighborhood. He felt these two timestamps, like two needles fitting perfectly, connecting an untold action. Late afternoon, Riley returned to Harper House for confrontation. Richard opened the door, looking thinner, eyes dark-circled. He reaffirmed Lena went out to clear her head, and he slept from about 10 to morning. When Riley placed the phone record in front, Richard stared a few seconds, then said, "Maybe I misdialed. I don't remember anything." "You called at 2:14 a.m., Riley emphasized. "Why up in the middle of night if you heard nothing?" Richard, silent, only said, "I was worried, so tried calling some friends." "Which friends?" "Maybe Jim, at the Public Works." The answer stunned Riley. Public Works, where Caleb Rowe, owner of the described truck. He closed his notebook, looked around the room, noticing the kitchen light still casting pale yellow streaks, like the night Lena disappeared. Back at the office, Riley pinned the neighborhood map to the board, connecting 3 points with red string: the Harper House, the 2:14 a.m. call, the High Street construction site. Next to it, he taped a photo of the beige button, writing below in his hand, "Sent termination point. First evidence." The night wind blew through the old window, slightly rattling the map's corner. Riley stood silently staring at the red string, knowing from now on he wasn't investigating a voluntary disappearance anymore. He was tracing the trail of a crime, only no one dared admit it yet. In the days that followed, the snow in Columbus began to melt, but the investigation into Lena Harper's disappearance was gradually freezing over. The leads that seemed promising in the first week quickly hit dead ends. Frank Riley, accustomed to the coldness of crime scenes, couldn't hide his frustration as the clues crumbled one by one. 3 days after questioning Richard Harper, a man called the police station, introducing himself as Douglas Crane, a delivery driver in the north part of the city. His voice was firm. "I saw her, the woman in the newspaper photo, walking on Summit Street the next morning. She wore a gray coat, brown hair, exactly like the missing woman." The investigation team immediately sent 2 officers to the area Crane described, bringing Lena's photo. A local woman, Janice Brown, confirmed that on the morning of February 4th, she had walked to a nearby store in a grayish coat. When shown the photo, Janice laughed. "Oh, they mistook me again. I heard from neighbors the police were looking for someone like me." This mistaken sighting made Riley grimace, while the press quickly ran headlines. "Missing teacher believed to be alive." The article in the Columbus Dispatch the next morning made things messier. A subheading read, "Sources say Lena Harper may have left voluntarily due to marital stress." The piece quoted an anonymous relative saying Lena was tired and wanted to start over elsewhere. Riley knew it was speculation, but the damage was done. The public began viewing it as a woman walked away case, prompting superiors to cut back resources. That afternoon, the police station received another anonymous call. The man on the line, voice hoarse and trembling, said briefly, "You'll find her at Griggs Reservoir. There, under the bridge, in the water." A rescue team was dispatched that night. Under floodlights reflecting off the icy lake, they probed the area with grappling hooks for 2 days. The result was only a few rotten wood pieces and an old tire. When Riley traced the call, the switchboard confirmed it came from a public phone booth near the central bus station. No cameras, no witnesses. The incident was labeled false tip interference. As time passed, each false lead weighed the case down further. In his small office, walls covered with maps, Riley began feeling surrounded by vague turns. He believed Mrs. Wells's account of the green pickup was true, but with no license plate, no additional witnesses, nothing to confirm. The 2:14 a.m. call remained an unsolved gap, and now his superior, Captain Morrissey, was growing impatient. In the morning meeting, Morrissey said firmly, "Frank, we've spent too many man-hours on a case that might be voluntary. No body, no blood, no crime scene. I need you to shift personnel to the bank robbery next week," Riley protested. "Sir, if she left, she'd have contacted family. No one leaves their car, wallet, and half-written letter behind." Morrissey crossed his arms. "I understand, but the budget doesn't allow it. You can't dig up all of Columbus on a hunch." Riley fell silent, but after the meeting, he still brought the High Street map to his desk. Part of the construction fence had been removed, and Riley believed that was where the story ended. He submitted a request to excavate the newly poured concrete sewer area, citing potential evidence verification. The request was denied within a day with a commander's note. No body, no approval for infrastructure digging costs. In the evenings that followed, Riley sat alone in his office, hearing the old heater's dry hum. On his desk, Lena's photo in the file glowed under the lamp. Young face, gentle smile, bright eyes looking straight at him, waiting for an explanation. He wrote in his personal journal, not the official report, "If I'm wrong, she'll come back. But if I'm right, someone's living peacefully after burying a life." The investigation team began to split. One group believed Lena left voluntarily, maybe to Cleveland, as she'd mentioned. The other, led by Riley, believed it was a covered-up murder. The debates dragged on in internal meetings, making the atmosphere increasingly tense. By late February, the snow had melted completely, but no new traces were found. The Harper case file, missing person #1980-0214, grew a few pages thicker with vague reports, a few scene photos, and no answers. Riley stored it all in a hard folder, writing one last line. Hypothesis 1, voluntary departure, doesn't fit data. Hypothesis 2, criminal act, needs verification at High Street Sewer. Then he closed the file, hand gripping an unlit cigarette. Outside, streetlights flickered on, casting faint yellow streaks on the snow. For Riley, the Lena Harper case wasn't over. It was only beginning to sink, silently like water under the sewer. He was never allowed to dig. Spring 1980 arrived with cold rains, washing away the old snow and most traces Riley still clung to. The Lena Harper disappearance had dragged on over 2 months, and the press barely mentioned it anymore. The police shifted manpower to new cases, but Riley couldn't let go. He believed something was still hidden in the East Como house, a small detail not yet seen properly. On April 5th, Riley returned to the scene again. The Harper house was no longer sealed, Richard living there alone. He allowed police to take additional fingerprints if needed. Riley brought charcoal powder and tape, dusting table surfaces, doorknobs, and items Lena often touched. When he brushed fine powder on the writing desk's corner, fingerprints emerged under the light. Most matched Richard's, but one, stranger, on the right corner of the unfinished letter from the first night. Riley taped the print onto an analysis card, noting, "Doesn't match Richard Harper." Not in Franklin PD internal database, but in 1980, automated fingerprint identification, AFEs, didn't exist. Each comparison was manual, magnifying each ridge, matching swirls on paper. The tech lab took nearly 2 weeks, checking over 40 local criminal records with no match. Riley requested the print be sent to the FBI in Washington, D.C., hoping for broader data. 2 months later, the response came, "No match found, records manual check complete." Every path seemed to lead to a dead end. Meanwhile, Riley reopened the High Street construction lead, where he still believed Lena's trail ended. He requested a list of all Franklin Public Works employees who worked there in February 1980. The list arrived with 18 names, engineers, truck drivers, concrete workers. Riley crossed off each as verified. At the 13th line, he paused. Caleb Rowe, 28, survey engineer, took leave the night of February 5th for light fever. No medical confirmation. He lived in Westerville, just 15 minutes drive from the Harper house. Riley called the Public Works office, asking about Rowe. The shift manager replied, "Rowe's quiet, good at his job, but often disappears without notice. He said he had a cold, so I gave him a day off." Nothing suspicious beyond the coincidence, and in investigations, coincidence is sometimes the most suspicious thing. That afternoon, Riley visited Rowe's home. The man opened the door, tall, light blonde hair, wearing a work jacket dusted with plaster. He was polite, but guarded, when Riley introduced himself. "I heard about her disappearance," Rowe said. "Terrible, but I didn't know her." Riley asked, "You worked at High Street that night, right?" Rowe replied, "No, I was sick, stayed home all day." "Ask my wife." His wife, appearing at the kitchen door, confirmed he was feverish, slept heavily. Riley nodded, thanked them, but his eyes scanned the room. On the shoe rack by the door, he saw old brown boots, serrated soles, large size, very similar to the print from the Harper house. He glanced, but couldn't seize them without a warrant. That night, Riley returned to the office, writing in his private notebook. Never submitted with official reports. Rowe, suspicious. Took leave, same day as disappearance. Owns green pickup. May know Richard Harper, via Public Works. Not enough evidence, await further development. But development never came. The following weeks, the case was sidelined. The team shifted to a Grove City bank robbery, and Riley was reassigned to assist. When he raised requesting a warrant for Rowe's house, superiors replied curtly, "No body, no grounds for a warrant." That fall the Harper file grew a few pages thicker, with reports yielding nothing new. The unfinished letter remained in its sealed envelope, the beige button dried of mud, and the tire track photo gathered dust on the evidence shelf. Riley took the file to storage, placing it in a brown paper box labeled Harper, Lena, missing February 1980, then shelved it among hundreds of others. Closing the storage door, he stood in the long silent hallway. The smell of old files and paper dust mixed with rusted metal, stifling but familiar. Riley pulled out his private notebook, adding a final line. "Not enough evidence, assume victim deceased. Recheck Rowe if any new findings." By late 1980, the case was officially classified unresolved. Suspicious disappearance. For Columbus police, it was a closed file. But for Riley, it remained an unresolved obsession, a mystery buried under the cold concrete of High Street, where he was never permitted to dig. In the years that followed, Columbus changed daily. New houses rose, roads widened, the High Street construction finished and paved with smooth asphalt. But in the Franklin Police Department's basement storage, the box labeled #1980-0214 remained on the third shelf, row F, covered in a thin layer of dust like cold ash. On the yellowed paper label, handwritten, Harper, Lena. Suspicious disappearance. From 1981 to the late decade, the case saw no new developments. During periodic inventories, staff only opened the box, checked the evidence list, and closed it. The unfinished letter stayed sealed in plastic, right corner still wax-stained. The beige button was wrapped in wax paper, marked "Found near High Street Construction," and the damp soil sample from the site's edge had hardened, grayish-brown. On the lead seal, the 1980 stamp remained intact, untouched. The Harper case became what police internally called a case that everyone forgot, a story everyone had heard of, but no one recalled details. Younger officers sometimes asked Riley, who stayed in investigations until the early 1990s, if the missing teacher was real. He'd reply curtly, "Real, and she's still out there somewhere around here." In 1986, Riley filed for early retirement after 25 years of service. He cleared his desk quietly, keeping only a few personal items, a silver lighter, his badge, and the worn leather notebook. In it, alongside scribbled notes on old cases, the last page bore his firm handwriting, High Street sewer, never opened. If someone finds it one day, start there. On his final day, Riley brought the Harper file to storage, personally placing the box back on the shelf, adding a small note outside. Keep sealed. Evidence intact. It wasn't standard procedure, but he did it out of habit, the way of someone who doesn't give up. Meanwhile, outside the investigation room, time kept swallowing memories. The Harper family fell apart. Lena's father died in 1984. Her mother moved to Indiana with relatives. Sister Maggie stayed in Columbus, holding small memorials each February 3rd by the Olentangy River, where she believed Lena might have passed last. But by the late 1980s, with no police contact, the memorials dwindled to a few candles lit in the rain, then stopped entirely. Richard Harper, Lena's husband, left the city in 1985. He sold the East Como house, moved to Michigan with a new woman. On paper, Lena Harper remained missing. Presumed alive. No charges, no accusations, just a name faded in administrative records. Time layered new concrete over everything, like High Street repaved. All that remained were fading ink lines, an old evidence box, and the final note of a retired detective. No one stays missing forever, we just stop looking too soon. The Lena Harper case was officially listed in Franklin PD's inactive files, with no assigned personnel. No one knew that, over 3 decades later, from that silent box, with its letter, button and soil sample seeming meaningless, someone else would open it and find what Riley believed his whole life, that beneath Columbus ground, a truth still waited to be unearthed. The Franklin Police Department's evidence vault sat deep in the basement of the old administrative building on Front Street, rarely visited except by storage clerks and veteran investigators. Since the 1980s, it housed tens of thousands of unsolved case files and evidence, packed tightly on wooden shelves stretching like a maze. No electronic system, no barcode scanners, just paper boxes sealed with lead, labeled in handwritten black marker. Each box held an unfinished story, numbered with codes only storage staff understood. Among hundreds of boxes in row F, third shelf, sat the evidence box for Lena Harper's disappearance. Code hash 1980-0214. Faded lead seal, yellowed brown paper but still sturdy. Each inventory, staff noted 3 lines, box intact, seal unbroken. Evidence complete. No one opened, no one cared. Inside the box were small items, enough to make any investigator pause if they knew the story behind them. Asterisk unfinished letter, lined paper, faded blue ink, right corner wax stained. Last line still, only I'll come back to talk when ending in a broken stroke. Notable, unnoticed then, the letter's stamp bore dried saliva, which 1980 technology couldn't exploit, but over 30 years later became the case's linchpin. Asterisk, beige button, wrapped in wax paper, dried mud, still in stitch grooves. Handwritten note in blue ink, found near High Street fence. Asterisk, soil sample, in a small glass jar, labeled construction site, High Street. Metal lid, slightly rusted. Asterisk, scene photos. Kodak, 35 negatives, dated February 7, 1980. Frames scratched, but showing clear snow with pickup tire tracks. Asterisk, neighborhood map. Riley's hand-drawn sketch, pencil lines faded, red marks, connecting Harper House to construction. In the right corner, his slanted print, sent stopped here. Time dusted everything. Many other boxes in the vault, rotted, seals rusted, labels illegible, but the Harper box remained oddly pristine, perhaps due to the lead seal, or because no one dared touch the relics of an unsolved disappearance. 34 years passed, the basement nearly forgotten, until fall 2014, when Columbus PD launched a cold case digitization program. The goal was to transfer all old evidence to an electronic system, aiding new DNA testing and the expanding nationwide CODIS database. A team of new staff was sent to the basement vault with scanners and inventory sheets. On September 12, 2014, among over 300 boxes logged for scanning, code hash 1980-0214 appeared for the first time in 3 decades. Harper, Lena, missing person, was entered into the computer, tagged inactive evidence intact. A young staffer, Julie Morris, opened the box to check the seal, photographing each item with a Nikon digital camera. When she reached the letter, she noticed the stamp's water stain, prompting her to add a note, possible biological trace present. No one in the team realized that small note would spark the entire turning point later. But upstairs, the newly formed cold case unit was seeking files with intact paper or organic evidence suitable for next-gen DNA testing. Each sealed box was an opportunity. Julie closed the box, affixed a new QR-coded label for digitization, and placed it on the pending shelf. In the day's final report, the last line simply read, File #1980-0214, preserved. Biological trace noted, recommended for forensic re-evaluation. Outside, night had fallen. The vault's yellow lights cast through light dust, illuminating the faded label's text. If anyone stood there long enough, they'd see Harper Lena glow in the haze, as if the story buried for 35 years was finally about to awaken. In January 2015, Columbus PD officially announced the formation of the Cold Case Unit, a team dedicated to unresolved cases, especially those with evidence still viable for DNA testing. The new team of 4 was tasked with revisiting hundreds of old boxes in the Franklin storage vault. At the first meeting, when the case list was projected on the board, one line caught the eye of young investigator Laura Dean, #1980-0214, Harper Lena, missing person suspicious, evidence intact. Laura, then just 32 years old, was meticulous and particularly drawn to missing persons cases without a body. She chose the Harper file almost instinctively. This case has been asleep too long, she told a colleague. 35 years is enough for someone to think their secret is buried. On February 4, 2015, Laura went down to the basement vault, where the rows of shelves still carried the musty smell of age. She carefully opened the case file box #1980-0214. Inside, everything was preserved intact. The letter, the button, the soil jar, the film photos, and the hand-drawn neighborhood map. The old paper label still bore Frank Riley's writing, "Sewer not opened." At the bottom corner, a line in red ink made Laura pause longer. Caleb Rowe, absent the day of disappearance, recheck if progress. She read that name over and over. In the official file, Rowe was mentioned only once, with no interrogation, no follow-up report. A forgotten name, lingering among thousands of pages of records, and sometimes, names like that are the key. Laura removed Lena Harper's letter from its old sealed bag, placing it on the table under a yellow light. The words, "I'll come back to talk when," seemed choked by time, faded, but the stamp in the right corner still held a faint stain, a dried saliva mark soaked into the paper fibers. In the 2014 digitization report, the vault staff had noted, possible biological trace present. For Laura, it wasn't just an administrative note. It was the first opportunity in 35 years. The next morning, she took the letter to the Ohio State Forensic Lab, a new facility equipped with fourth-generation DNA testing systems. The chief forensic scientist, Dr. Elaine Parks, met her in the pristine, sterile lab. "Old paper samples like this are tough," she said, pulling on rubber gloves. "But if the stamp was licked, we might extract epithelial cells." Laura replied, "I just need a chance. Anything." Dr. Parks examined it under a microscope, then nodded. "It's doable. We'll cut the stamp's edge, process it with PBS solution, and amplify the DNA with PCR. But it'll take at least 10 days. Laura left the new sealed envelope, signed the paperwork, and exited the lab with an odd feeling as if she'd just restarted a time machine forgotten for 3 decades. While awaiting results, she returned to the cold case office to reconstruct the timeline of the disappearance night. From Riley's handwritten notes, Laura pinned all the milestones to a large investigation board, *9:15 p.m. Neighbors heard arguing, *10:30 p.m. Richard Harper claimed his wife went out to clear her head, *2:14 a.m. 26-second local call, recipient unidentified. Asterisk 2:20 a.m. Witness Wells saw a green pickup leave the neighborhood, heading toward High Street. Asterisk 2:30 a.m. Tire tracks and button found near the construction fence. She drew a red thread, connecting each point on the map, mirroring Riley's method. At the end, she marked the High Street construction site where the dogs lost the scent. Below, she wrote, "Missing, did not leave the area." Laura studied each old report, trying to understand Riley's reasoning. In his notes, she sensed his frustration at not being allowed to dig the sewer, and the final line in his notebook sent a chill through her. If someone finds it one day, start there. She looked up at the old map and almost whispered, "I'll start there." To complete the picture, Laura sought more data on Franklin Public Works employees from 1980. City Archives sent her a scanned microfilm list, faint but legible. Caleb Rowe's name reappeared. The note beside it read, "Absent morning of February 5, 80, reason illness." No medical confirmation, no shift replacement report. Laura checked civilian records. Rowe still lived in Grove City, less than 20 miles from Columbus. Now 63, retired, former construction supervisor. DMV records showed he still owned an old Ford F-100, dark green, first registered in 1979. She lingered on that line. That afternoon, Dr. Parks called. Her voice was even, professional, but with a hint of something uncontainable. "We extracted DNA from the stamp. Male. And it just matched a CODIS profile. Caleb Rowe." Laura gripped the phone tightly. In that moment, the cold case office fell silent, only the hum of the air conditioner audible. 35 years, and a dried saliva mark, had finally spoken what people overlooked. She reopened the case box, looked at Riley's handwritten note, and nodded slightly. A promise between two generations of investigators, who never met, had been fulfilled. That night, Laura sat alone at the investigation board, rearranging the timeline, adding a new thread from Caleb Rowe, absent February 5, 1980, to DNA match, 2015. The final red thread closed the circle Riley left unfinished. She wrote at the top of the internal report, "Case hash 1980-0214, reopened 02-2015. DNA evidence confirmed. Suspect identified, Caleb Rowe." Outside the window, winter snow began falling again, light as memory's dust. But this time, someone was tracing back time to deliver justice for a woman who vanished that winter, and for the detective who vowed never to stop searching for her. Monday morning, March 9, 2015, the DNA test results from the Ohio State Lab were officially sent to the cold case unit. The sealed yellow envelope bore Dr. Elaine Parks' mark. The scientist, Laura Dean, had personally handed the stamp sample to 3 weeks earlier. She opened it slowly, each thin sheet carrying the weight of 35 years of waiting. At the final conclusion line, just a few bold words, "DNA match, Caleb E. Rowe, DOB. 1954, confidence 99.98%. Laura set the paper down, taking a deep breath. Everything around her seemed to pause, the air conditioner's hum, the typing in the hallway. That name, Caleb Rowe, had lain dormant in the file since 1980. A mere marginal note in Riley's notebook. Now, thanks to a few dried cells on a stamp's corner, it was the key to reopening the entire case. She stood, went to the large investigation board, unpinned Riley's old photo, and pinned a new sheet. "DNA match, Rowe." Below, she wrote in red, "Suspect active confirmation. Recheck employment history." 3 days later, Laura visited Franklin Public Works to verify Rowe's past. The personnel archive room was dusty, lined with metal cabinets. An older clerk helped pull a file labeled Rowe, War Z. Inside was Caleb Edward Rowe, field engineer. On the first page, a clear line Project High Street storm drain expansion. Jan to March 1980. She flipped quickly through. The February timesheet was circled in red. Absent, February 5, 1980. No medical report filed. A pencil note in the margin, called in sick, unverified. That was the night Lena Harper vanished. Laura photographed all documents, feeling the puzzle pieces aligning. The dogs had lost the scent at the high street construction, green pickup tire tracks in the snow, and now the engineer supervising that site, absent the day of the disappearance. Every thread led to one man. She rechecked Rose's current address, a 2-story wooden house in Grove City, about 20 miles from Columbus. The 61-year-old, retired, lived with his wife. Neighbors described him as polite, loves gardening, quiet. But Laura knew a calm exterior couldn't erase what DNA revealed. She spent a week reviewing all data. Rose green Ford F-100 pickup was still registered in DMV records. License plate changed twice, but chassis and engine number matched 1979 records. From the 1980 construction map, Rose supervised the main sewer digging area, where the dogs stopped. Rose's name appeared in local phone records, on the same circuit as the 2:14 a.m. Harper House call. All were details once overlooked for lack of technology to connect them. Now, with DNA and digitized data, they formed an undeniable chain. Friday afternoon, Laura presented all evidence to Captain Tom Weller, Cold Case Unit Chief. He reviewed each photo, each copy, then said slowly, "DNA is enough to open a formal investigation, but not enough to arrest. We need to monitor, observe, and confirm Rose's link to the Harpers before acting." A closed-door meeting was held that day. The city police chief approved a covert surveillance order on Caleb Rowe, per protocol for cases lacking arrest evidence. 2 task force detectives were assigned to join Laura, using civilian vehicles and long-range cameras. From mid-March, they began watching Rose's home. Each morning, he watered plants, chatted with neighbors, then drove his pickup. Still the old Ford F-100, repainted, white plates, to a hardware store a few miles away. He lived a life so normal it was suspicious. During one tale, Laura noticed him stop at a new construction site, staring at concrete sewer pipes, hands clenched into fists. "He's revisiting where he hid the past," she told her colleague over the radio. Alongside surveillance, Laura dug for connections between Rowe and Richard Harper. From old bank records, she found they co-invested in a small construction tool purchase in 1979. Harper and Rowe Construction Supply. The company lasted under 3 months before dissolving in losses. No tax filings, no dissolution records. It was just a shell. That evening, Laura returned to the office, looking at Lena Harper's old photo on the board. The eyes in the picture still shone like that winter morning before she vanished. Laura added a final line to her investigation journal. "It all began and ended on High Street. Rowe was there. DNA matches. February 5, 1980. The day Lena Harper ceased to exist. Outside, the city night glowed with lights, but inside her was a strange silence. A 61-year-old man still lived peacefully, gardening, drinking morning coffee, while a woman was forgotten for 35 years. And Laura Dean knew, from this moment, the pursuit had begun. In the Cold Case Unit office, fluorescent lights shone on maps spread across the table. Laura Dean leaned in, circling each point in red by timeline. Each circle a link between the 1980 disappearance night and the man now under surveillance in Grove City. She started with Franklin Public Works shift calendar, found in the archived file with Rowe's timesheet. His shift ended at 11 p.m. on February 3, 1980. But the High Street construction site kept lights on all night for the next shift's tech crew. Notably, between 1 o'clock and 3 a.m. The activity column was blank, no reports, no signatures. Such gaps were often ignored, but to Laura, that's where the crime hid. She pulled a 1979 hand-drawn High Street drainage project map. The sewer lines ran parallel to the road, a secondary branch leading straight to a vacant lot behind the East Como residential area. Overlaying it with Riley's sketch, the 2 points matched perfectly, right where the dogs lost Lena's scent. Not a coincidence. Laura flipped through old Polaroid photos from the Harper and Rowe Construction Supply tax file, the short-lived company. The image showed 2 young men, Richard Harper and Caleb Rowe, beside a dark green Ford F-100. The photo was taken outside a warehouse, dated on the back, January 1980. When zoomed in, Laura saw the left taillight was dim, matching Doreen Wells's description. One taillight dim, truck moving slowly toward High Street at 2:20 a.m. She placed the photo on the map, penciling a line from the Harper House to the High Street construction, nearly a mile. On that route, only one turn led into the old residential area, where, per the technical drawing, a secondary sewer access was never fully sealed. If someone wanted to hide something there at night, all it took was a small truck and knowledge of how to open a metal cover. Rowe had supervised that very sewer's construction. Laura circled the area, staring at it long. In her mind, the winter night of 1980 emerged like an old film. Lena stepped out after the argument, the living room light still on. The green Ford F-100 stopped at the street corner, Richard at the wheel, Rowe in the passenger seat. The door opened, Lena approached, about to say something, then vanished into the dark. 6 minutes later, the local call was made from the Harper House phone. On the other end, possibly Rowe, telling Richard, "It's done." Laura looked away from the map. She couldn't write that as an official conclusion, but every detail said the same thing. And if Riley were alive, he'd likely think as she did. Lena Harper's body never left High Street. That afternoon, Laura and two agents visited the old site. Now a bustling commercial strip, coffee shops, florists, barbers. Beneath the street, the old sewer network still functioned, covered in new concrete, but structurally unchanged. She looked down at a cast-iron manhole cover marked HS-12B, matching the 1979 drawings code. A city engineer accompanying explained, "This sewer section hasn't been touched in over 30 years. Digging it up would cost a lot." Laura replied firmly, "We don't need to dig the whole line, just open the right spot." Laura replied firmly, "We don't need to dig the whole line, just open the right spot." She photographed the spot, rechecked GPS coordinates, and sent a proposal to excavate the High Street sewer for biological or material evidence. The proposal went to Superior's coded re-examination site #HS12B. On the drive back, light snow dusted the car hood. Laura stopped at a red light, seeing her reflection in the windshield. The yellow street light flickered across her resolute eyes. In her mind, it wasn't maps or reports, but the image of that young woman never found. She said softly to herself, "Riley, I'm reaching where you stopped. This time, we'll open it." On the morning of April 22, 2015, the Cold Case Unit, with the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's forensic team, returned to High Street. The sky was overcast, a light drizzle on the freshly paved road. Laura Dean stood on the sidewalk, holding a copy of the 1979 construction drawing. She pointed to the HS-12B mark, the secondary sewer access built by Franklin Public Works, overseen by Caleb Rowe's team. A small truck parked by the road, technicians lifting the manhole cover with a hydraulic crane. The smell of damp and old mud wafted up. 35 years untouched, one said. Under industrial lights, the narrow space revealed rough concrete, moldy walls, black pooled water. The forensic team suited up, descending via a steel ladder. Laura stood above, watching each move. The clang of metal echoed. Moments later, a technician's voice rang out. "Found a reflective metal object at 1.2 meters depth, right of the main pipe." They scraped mud away with a small shovel, carefully retrieving it. When the light hit, Laura recognized it instantly. A tarnished gold ring, inscribed inside, Or and L, 1977. She clenched her fist. That was the year Richard and Lena Harper married, noted clearly in the original file. Soon after, the team dug another half-meter deeper. A technician whispered, "Fabric here." A piece of gray-green wool, frayed but intact, buried under old soil. When lifted, they found long brown hairs tangled in the weave. Laura signaled to bag it separately, sealed on site. No one spoke for minutes. The rain's patter mixed with the water pump and their racing heartbeats. When all samples were brought to the surface, Laura stood looking at the ring in its sealed bag, its faint gleam reflecting under the gray sky. She felt like she held a piece of the city's buried memory and of the woman forgotten for 3 decades. Soil samples from the area were sent to the Ohio Soil Analysis Lab in Dayton. A week later, the results stunned the team. The cement and sand mix in the soil perfectly matched materials used by Franklin Public Works in 1980, from the same supplier in Rowe's construction records. The fly ash, lime, and gypsum dust ratio was a near-unique identifier for that era. No doubt remained. The evidence site was the sewer section poured by Rowe's team right after Lena's disappearance. Laura held the report, her eyes fixed on the final conclusion. Soil sample composition consistent with Franklin PW Batch 02-1980, High Street Sector. She recalled Riley's note in his journal, sewer not opened. Now it had been opened, and everything he predicted, every detail was correct. The next afternoon, the cold case unit held an urgent meeting. They projected all the scene images, the ring inscribed R and L, the hair, the wool fabric, the soil sample, the construction diagram. Laura presented concisely, "We have Rowe's DNA on the letter's stamp. We have evidence matching the area he oversaw. We have personal items belonging to the victim. And now, we have construction materials confirming the timeline. All within the radius he controlled." The room was dead silent. Captain Weller nodded slowly. "Enough for an arrest warrant." Laura immediately contacted the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. Chief Prosecutor Angela Morton listened to the full report and requested an immediate review of the file. "If the court approves, we need to act fast before he knows he's being watched." 2 days later, Morton signed the emergency arrest warrant for Caleb Edward Rowe on charges of murder in the first degree. Cold case reopened. That evening, Laura drove through High Street again. The road now glowed with lights, bustling with passers-by. No one knew that beneath this street, where they walked, a man's secret had been hidden, believing he'd escaped all pursuit. She stopped the car, looking toward the trees where the old manhole had been opened. In her hand, the R and L ring rested in an evidence bag, silent as Lena's final testimony. The rain had stopped. The air still carried the scent of mud, but lighter, as if the city had just shed a burden it carried for 35 years. Tomorrow morning, they would go to Grove City. This time, not to surveil. This time, they would knock. On the morning of August 18, 2015, the Grove City sky was still cloaked in mist. Before the 2-story wooden house on Waltham Road, 4 police cars parked silently along the curb, the arrest team in plain clothes stepping out. Laura Dean stood behind the command vehicle, eyes fixed on the white-painted door where the man she'd tracked for half a year lived calmly. "Team A, approach front door. Team B, circle to the back," she said softly over the radio. "Target unarmed, but proceed with caution." At 7:04 a.m., the door opened. Caleb Rowe, 61, in a wool robe, still holding a coffee mug. He froze briefly upon seeing the gleaming badge before him. "Mr. Rowe," Laura said, "you're under arrest for charges related to the disappearance of Lena Harper in Columbus, 1980. The man stood stunned, mouth moving. "What? 35 years ago?" she replied curtly. "Yes, and time has spoken for you." Rowe didn't resist. He offered his wrists for cuffs, eyes dazed, mixed with horror. As he was escorted to the car, neighbors peeked through curtains. They'd never seen the quiet man who loved planting orchids and white daisies surrounded by police. After Rowe was taken, the search team entered the house. Everything was meticulously recorded: tidy living room, neatly stacked engineering books, a steaming coffee mug on the table. In the garage, they found an old digging tool set, shovel, leather gloves, a half-broken cement bucket. In the garden shed, a yellow work jacket stained with old paint hung neatly, labeled Franklin Public Works. When the tech team lifted the jacket, a flashlight revealed paint streaks along the sleeve, the same pale yellow-gray, identical to the paint sample from the Harper house side door in the 1980 film photos. In the original file, Riley had noted, "strange paint scratch, source unidentified." Now, the answer was in hand. Under the desk drawer, they found a 1980 High Street construction blueprint, edges crumpled, with a pencil note. Drain 12B, east side access. It was the exact spot the forensic team excavated. Laura stood looking at the map, a chill running through her. This man, for 35 years, kept the blueprint of his greatest secret's hiding place. While the forensic team collected and sealed evidence, Laura drove straight to Columbus Police Headquarters, where Rowe was in preliminary questioning. He sat silently, eyes cloudy like glass. His public defender had just been called. When Laura entered, he barely looked up, meeting her with weary eyes. "We found Lena Harper's wedding ring," she said, voice calm, "in the sewer you built, and your DNA was on her last letter." Rowe stayed silent, eyes down. Only his cuffed hands trembled slightly. While Rowe was detained, Laura opened a parallel investigation. Richard Harper, Lena's husband, Rowe's brief business partner. He was urgently summoned to the station for questioning. Entering the interrogation room, he looked haggard, gray hair, eyes restless. "Mr. Harper," Laura said, placing the old Polaroid of the two men by the green pickup before him. "Do you remember this photo being taken?" Richard glanced briefly, lips trembling. "Old story. I don't know anything, but this truck matches the witness description, and it belonged to the company you co-owned. Don't you find that a coincidence?" Richard swallowed hard, voice breaking. "Caleb was just a friend. I didn't think he," Laura cut in. "What are you afraid of, Mr. Harper?" The man stayed silent for a long time, hands clenched tightly. Finally he uttered, "If I talk, everything ends for me." Laura looked at him, eyes cold as steel. "Everything ended in 1980, Mr. Harper. Now only the truth remains." Meanwhile, in the next room, the tech team ran a rapid analysis on the yellow jacket. Under UV light, the paint streaks matched 100% with the Harper house side door paint, per the lab report. The final door in the Lena Harper case was beginning to open. One man arrested, another trembling before memories they thought buried with High Street's concrete. And Laura knew, just one confession more, and the 35-year darkness would recede. The Columbus Police Department's third-floor interrogation room stayed lit all night. Caleb Rowe sat at the end of the metal table, wrists still cuffed, eyes sunken, hair damp with sweat. Before him were Det, Laura Dean and Assistant Prosecutor Mark Ellis, overseeing the interrogation. The recording camera ran continuously, the clock showing 10:45 p.m., over 10 hours since questioning began. "Mr. Rowe," Laura said, voice calm but firm, "we have your DNA on Lena Harper's last letter, her wedding ring in the sewer you built, and a jacket with paint matching her house's door. What else do you want to deny?" Rowe exhaled sharply, eyes drifting to the small window. He shook his head, muttering, "You think I killed her? I'm not a murderer." "Then tell me what happened," Laura replied. For the first 3 hours, Rowe repeated, "I'm not involved. I just helped Richard with house repairs." But each time Laura presented more evidence, the Polaroid, paint, blueprint, shift schedule, his shoulders slumped further. The pressure of 35 years of silence began to crack. Near midnight, the room's air grew thick. Laura placed the photo of the R&L 1977 ring before him. She was wearing it that night, wasn't she? Rowe stayed silent for a long time. Then his voice, hoarse and trembling. "It was an accident. I didn't mean for it to happen." Laura said nothing, just stared. He slowly bowed his head, trembling hands clenching. "That night," Rowe began, "Richard called me to help. He said Lena was furious, wanted to leave. I'd just finished my shift at High Street, drove the Ford to their house. When I got there, they were still arguing." She threw a glass on the floor. Richard grabbed her arm, then pushed hard. She fell, hit her head on the table corner. I just heard a thud, then silence. Laura asked softly, "She died right then?" Rowe nodded, voice choked. Blood everywhere. Richard panicked. He told me to help. "No one will believe me if they see this," he said. "I didn't think. I just followed." And then, Rowe stared at the metal table, voice flat like recounting a nightmare. "We wrapped her in a wool blanket, the sofa throw. I drove to the construction site. No one was on duty. I opened the secondary manhole, the spot I was overseeing, still open before concrete pouring. Richard helped me pull her down. We placed her under the main pipe, poured concrete over the next morning. I told the crew I'd finished the foundation. Laura stayed silent. The room held only the camera's hum. Ro took a breath, continuing. I didn't think we'd be found. I left the site that afternoon, took leave, lied about being sick. Richard told me to stay quiet. Then he moved away. Why keep it secret for 35 years? Ro closed his eyes. I thought I could forget. But every night, I hear it. The sound of her fall, the glass breaking. Laura looked at him, voice low but sharp. You call it an accident, but you poured concrete over her, Caleb. That's not forgetting, that's hiding. He bowed his head, tears rolling slowly. I know, I deserve to be here. After signing the confession, Ro requested to mark the exact coordinates where Lena Harper's body was buried. He drew a sketch with pencil, marking the spot on the old construction blueprint, right under the third junction, main pipe D12B. When Laura asked, "You're sure?" he replied, almost whispering, "I poured the concrete myself. I can't forget that place." That night, Laura sent the sketch to the forensic team. An emergency excavation order was approved at 3:20 a.m. A technical crew brought heavy equipment to High Street, sealing off the area. Under industrial lights and echoing drills, concrete layers were removed. When the final slab cracked open, the smell of damp earth rose. A technician leaned in, calling over the radio, "Human remains here." Laura stood silently at the manhole's edge, eyes fixed on the dark below. Beneath the concrete, after 35 years, Lena Harper was finally found. In the distance, sirens signaled the forensic team's arrival. Laura turned away, saying nothing. In her hand, Ro's trembling pencil sketch was soaked with rain. The secret Columbus buried for 3.5 decades had risen with the mud, and with it, the truth finally had its voice. Dawn broke as the forensic team finished securing the High Street area. The once bustling road was eerily quiet, specialized trucks from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation lining both sides. White plastic tarps shielded the manhole, halogen lights casting a cold glow on wet concrete. DT. Laura Dean, in a reflective vest, face still smudged with dirt after a long night, approached as the excavation team began lowering drills. At the exact spot Caleb Rowe indicated, the third junction of the D12B sewer line, under nearly 40 centimeters of concrete. The drill's heavy rhythm cut through the concrete. White dust rose thickly, mingling with the early morning chill. When the concrete was removed, technicians used hand shovels to avoid damaging what lay beneath. After over an hour, a patch of dark, damp earth emerged, stark against the gray cement. A technician leaned in, shining a light. His voice, soft but startling. "Bones here." Mud was carefully cleared. Under the light, ivory-white bones appeared, small joints, rib fragments, then a skull cracked at the left temple. Nearby, caked in mud, was a gold ring, inscription, faint but legible. Orr and L, 1977. Beside it, tangled in the soil, a frayed gray-green wool fabric with long brown hairs caught in the weave. Laura stood a few meters away, heart tightening. Everything matched Ro's confession: the wool blanket, the wedding ring, the burial spot under the third junction. The final piece of the 35-year-old case was emerging, bit by bit, from the cold concrete. The forensic team took nearly 6 hours to collect all samples. Each bone, each fabric scrap was noted, numbered, sealed separately. The remains were lifted from the sewer on a specialized stretcher, wrapped in white cloth. As the stretcher was wheeled out, everyone fell silent. Only footsteps and the patter of rain on the tarp remained. That afternoon, at the Ohio Forensic Medical Center, Dr. Hannah Collins, the state's lead forensic examiner, received case 80-0214. She opened the evidence bags, inspecting each bone. The skull showed an 8 centimeters crack at the left temple, fractured cheekbone, consistent with a heavy blow from a hard, angled object. Matching Rose hit her head on the table corner account. No signs of stabbing or strangulation, Collins recorded. death likely instantaneous from traumatic brain injury. Nearby, a technician separated hairs from the fabric, comparing them to a sample from Lena's old comb submitted by family in 1980. The match was absolute. The DNA analysis unit took 3 days to complete cross-matching. On April 27, 2015, the official report reached the cold case unit. The bold capital letters nearly made Laura drop the file. DNA match, sample identified as Lena M. Harper, confidence 99.99%. On the table, the wedding ring sat beside a 1977 wedding photo. Same inscription, same cross-stitched inner band. Chief Weller looked at the photo, exhaling softly, "So she's come home." The forensic report later confirmed * cause of death. Blunt traumatic brain injury. * mechanism. Direct impact with a solid object consistent with an 80 centimeters wooden table corner in 1980 scene photos. * time of death, approximately 2 o'clock to 2:30 a.m., February 4, 1980. * wrapping traces, recovered wool fabric matched fibers from the Harper living room sofa set per 1980 Kodak film photos. This report, with Roe's detailed confession, formed the first airtight evidence chain in 3 decades. 1. DNA on the letter stamp confirmed Roe's direct contact with Lena's item that night. 2. Paint on the jacket matched the Harper side door, proving his presence at the scene. 3. Ring and fabric, victim's personal items matching the wrapped body account. 4. Remains and brain injury, fully consistent with the hit head-on table description. 5. Roe's confession provided exact coordinates where the body was found. All pieces aligned seamlessly, irrefutable. Riley's 1980 map, note sewer not opened, now proved the case was accurately predicted. Only technology and time then weren't enough. On April 29, Laura brought the forensic report to prosecutor Angela Morton. The woman set the file down, looking at the young investigator and saying slowly, 35 years, and now we have the full chain, DNA, evidence, confession, remains. This isn't a cold case anymore, Laura. This is a murder case closed by science and persistence. Laura nodded, voice low, not just science, ma'am, by a man named Riley's Faith. That afternoon, local news broke, Columbus 1980 cold case. Remains identified as missing woman Lena Harper. People along High Street paused at coffee shop screens, watching forensic vans with white tarp stretchers. A woman whispered, "She's finally been brought home." In the cold case office, Laura looked out the window, the sunset casting a glow over the city. Beside her was the newly labeled evidence box. Closed. Harper, Lena, recovered 2015. A feeling both heavy and relieving echoed within her. For the first time since the winter of 1980, Columbus knew exactly what happened to Lena Harper. But Laura also understood, justice wasn't finished. One more person had to face the truth, Richard Harper. The man who had stayed silent for 35 years, and now could stay silent no longer. In December 2015, after 35 years buried in files, the Lena Harper case went to trial at the Franklin County Courthouse. Outside, snow fell lightly on High Street, where a secret had once been hidden in a concrete sewer. People crowded outside the court, TV reporters aiming cameras at the entrance. Inside, the air was still. In the front row, DT, Laura Dean sat with prosecutor Angela Morton. Across from them, defendant Caleb Edward Rowe, 61, appeared in a gray suit, hands trembling slightly. When Judge Elliot Green struck the gavel to open the trial, the sound echoed like a bell closing a long chapter of the city. Morton opened the trial by recounting the 35-year investigation from that winter night in 1980 when Lena vanished, to the moment the cold case unit unearthed her remains under the High Street sewer. Her voice was steady, firm. This is the story of a woman who left home after an argument and never returned. Of a man who poured concrete over the truth. But justice doesn't melt with time. On the screen, evidence appeared, the letter with Roe's DNA, the yellow-painted jacket matching the Harper side door, the 1980 construction blueprint, the R&L 1977 ring, photos of the excavated remains. The jury sat stunned at the image of the manhole, bones, and wedding ring mixed in mud. Morton said, "Concrete can hide a body, but it can't hide memory." Defense attorney Howard Clancy stood, pacing slowly. He said, "My client doesn't deny helping conceal the death, but this was an accident, not murder. Mr. Rowe panicked, acted foolishly, but didn't intend to kill anyone." Morton countered immediately, "An accident doesn't lead to pouring concrete over a body and staying silent for 35 years. An accident doesn't keep a blueprint of the burial site." He knew exactly what he was doing. On the second day, forensic expert Dr. Hannah Collins presented to the court. She projected a CT scan of the victim's skull, pointing out the crack at the left temple. The cause of death was blunt traumatic brain injury, consistent with a heavy impact against a hard, angled object, like a table edge. She also confirmed DNA from the hair and bones matched Lena Harper perfectly. Clancy tried to counter, "You can't confirm who caused the fall," Collins replied. "I can only confirm the person who buried her knew how to mix concrete." The courtroom buzzed softly. On the third day, Laura Dean took the stand. She recounted rediscovering the forgotten file, extracting DNA from the stamp, identifying Rowe, excavating the sewer, and finding Lena's remains. When Morton asked, "Without Detective Riley's notes, would this case have been solved?" Laura answered softly, "He knew where to look. I just followed his steps." Behind her, the screen showed a page from his old notebook, scrawled words, "Sewer not opened." The courtroom fell silent. Morton said, "A detective long gone believed something was buried under that street, and 35 years later, he was right." Richard Harper, the victim's husband, was summoned next. He took the stand wearily, voice trembling. "I didn't touch her. I was just scared." Morton asked, "Scared of what?" Richard paused long, then said, "Scared people would know I let her die, and did nothing." The room bowed their heads. No one spoke further. On the final day, Prosecutor Morton delivered her closing argument. Her voice rang clear, cold, and certain. "When someone kills and confesses, we can still talk of remorse. But when someone pours concrete over a body and lives silently for 35 years, that's conscious crime." The defendant says accident, but every action after was concealment. And concealing the truth is killing her again. She paused, staring at Rowe. The concrete hardened, but justice did not. Clancy only shook his head, offering no rebuttal. The courtroom sank into silence, only the wall clock ticking. Judge Green leaned forward. "Jury, you've heard enough. Deliver your verdict." 3 hours later, as the jury returned, the courtroom stood. The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, held a paper, voice trembling but clear. "We, the Ohio jury, find the defendant Caleb Edward Rowe guilty, murder in the first degree." A wave of emotion swept the room. Rowe sat motionless, eyes closed tightly. As an officer cuffed him, he whispered, "I tried to forget." Judge Green read the sentence, "Life without parole." The gavel struck, resolute as the closing of an old secret's coffin. Laura sat quietly, hands gripping the file tightly. She felt no joy, only weight. Morton removed her glasses, saying softly, "We've done our part." Laura nodded. Outside, snow began falling heavily. The light blurred through the courthouse windows, casting over High Street, where lit shops now stood, above the sewer that once hid a body. Richard Harper left the court silently, no one watching. He knew justice had come, but his guilt needed no sentence. Laura stood on the steps, watching snow cover the road. In her mind echoed Riley's words from years ago, "No one stays missing forever, we just stop looking too soon." Now they had found her. And as snow blanketed the city, she knew justice, though late, could still melt the cold concrete, hiding the truth for 40 years. On the morning of December 21, 2015, the Franklin County Courthouse was packed. Outside, heavy snow blanketed the steps. Inside, the jury had deliberated 8 hours the previous night, and now returned with the final verdict. Judge Elliott Green took the bench, voice low and resonant, The trial of State of Ohio v. Caleb Edward Rowe continued. Everyone stood. Rowe sat between two bailiffs, face pale, eyes vacant. In the back row, Richard Harper bowed his head, hands clasped, detritus. Laura Dean sat in front, the worn file resting neatly on her lap. No one breathed heavily, no one spoke. The jury foreperson, a silver-haired woman, stood holding a paper. Her voice was steady, but trembled slightly. We, the Ohio jury, after reviewing all evidence, find the defendant, Caleb Edward Rowe, guilty of second-degree murder and obstruction of justice. The courtroom stayed silent. Then pens scratched, keyboards clicked. Rowe looked up, eyes closing as if hearing his own fate pronounced. Morton kept a calm face, but her hand tightened slightly. Laura glanced over, her gaze not triumphant, only a heavy stillness. Judge Green nodded, opening the file before him. Based on the jury's verdict and the particularly grave nature of the case, the court sentences life imprisonment without parole. The gavel struck 3 times, echoing in the quiet room. Rowe said nothing, staring straight ahead. An officer approached, cuffing him. As he was led away, Rowe turned, his eyes meeting Laura's for a moment. He opened his mouth, almost inaudibly. I tried to forget, but she wouldn't let me. Then he bowed his head, passing through the metal door. Outside the hallway, reporters crowded, flashes blinking, a news ticker running on local TV. Columbus cold case solved after 35 years. Caleb Rowe sentenced to life. In the same ruling, the court declared Richard Harper not prosecuted due to insufficient direct evidence of his involvement in the death. Morton didn't contest the decision. No DNA, no self-incriminating testimony, she said. We only have silence, and sometimes silence is its own sentence. When reporters asked for Harper's reaction, he said just one line to the camera. I should have stopped it from happening. That afternoon, Laura returned to the cold case unit office. The sky outside was heavy gray, snow falling steadily. On her desk was the old file box coded hash 1980-0214, labeled Harper, Lena, missing person. She opened it. Inside the unfinished letter, button, fabric scrap, High Street map, and Riley's note. Laura took a pen, writing on the file's first page, case closed, solved 2015. She signed, Dead it, Laura Dean. As she closed it, she looked through the window, where the winter sunset glowed on the sparkling snow. In her mind echoed Riley's notebook words. No one stays missing forever, we just stop looking too soon. Now Lena Harper had been found, and justice, though late, had arrived. Outside the building, wind swept through High Street, past roads where, 35 years ago, a young teacher walked home after her last class. Now, beneath that concrete, the past rested. Laura turned off the light, closed the office door, and carried the file box out of the building. On the cover, the red words newly written reflected the hallway light. Solved. A case closed, but in that silence, she knew Riley, somewhere, was surely smiling. In February 2016, exactly 36 years after Lena Harper's disappearance, Columbus held a small but solemn memorial at High Street, where the old concrete construction and her remains were found. Light snow dusted the steps, flowers placed by a new bronze plaque. In memory of Lena Harper, 1955-1980. She was found. Justice was too. People stood quietly, candles flickering in the winter afternoon. Lena's former students, now middle-aged, brought a 1979 class photo. A silver-haired woman, once her colleague at Clintonville Elementary, choked up. She always told students true light would come, even if you had to wait long. And today, that light returned. Local papers ran front-page stories. Cold case solved after 3 decades. Justice for teacher found beneath High Street. The Columbus Dispatch wrote, Justice may be buried, but it lives, patiently waiting for hands to unearth the past. In those days, news repeatedly mentioned debt. Laura Dean, dubbed the one who woke the sleeping file, when asked her thoughts, she said simply, I just kept an unfinished promise. At Franklin Public Works, where Caleb Rowe once worked, they removed the old nameplate from the chief engineer's office, replacing it with a small plaque noting the case's history. For many, it was not just a symbol of personal guilt, but a reminder of an era's investigative flaws, lacking technology and patience. The Clintonville community, where Lena once lived, began holding annual candlelight memorials on February 3rd, called Harper Night. They built a small memorial garden in the schoolyard where she taught, filled with lavender, her favorite flower, students said, because it wasn't afraid of winter. In the cold case unit office, Laura returned to her familiar desk, afternoon light streaming through the window onto the gray steel file cabinet. She opened the R Active Files drawer, pulling out the box-coded hash 1980-0214, now labeled Harper, Lena, Resolve 2015. She brushed light dust from the lid, looking at Riley's scrawled note, "Sewer not opened. Now it's opened, sir," she said softly. On her desk, that morning's paper lay open to the editorial. The headline read, "Justice never dies, it only sleeps in files waiting to be awakened." Laura read it, then smiled. It was the line she'd said at the final press conference. Now the closing of a new chapter in Columbus investigation. Late afternoon, she and the cold case team went to the basement storage where it all began. The air was damp and cold, smelling of old paper and rusted metal. She opened the third drawer, row F, where the Harper box had sat for 3 decades. Now that space bore a label, Resolved 2015. She placed the box in its spot, tightening the metal edge, then affixed a new seal. The ceiling light reflected through faint dust, shining on the box's cover, where the red words, "Case closed. Solved 2015" stood out. Laura stood still for a few seconds, took a deep breath, and turned away. On her way out of the vault, she paused at the small window overlooking High Street. Outside, snow fell lightly, car lights reflecting on the wet road. In that moment, she felt as if she heard footsteps echoing from the past, no longer the heavy tread of guilt, but the calm stride of a soul finally returned. That evening, the TV news ended with a close-up of the bronze plaque, candles flickering, snow dusting the letter edges. The anchor read the closing, "Columbus closes a 3-decade case, but opens faith that every truth, no matter how deeply buried, will be found." Fade out, the storage vault's light dimmed, leaving only the red words on the Harper, Lena. Resolved 2015 box cover, faintly glowing in the dark. Justice had slept too long, and now it was awakened. The Columbus 1980 cold case solved. Story reminds us, in American life today, that justice often comes from persistence and overlooked details. A stamp with dried saliva helped date. Laura Dean solved the case after 35 years. The practical lesson: preserve files, letters, photos, receipts properly, as technology, DNA, digitization, can turn inanimate objects into decisive evidence. Detective Riley's note, "Sewer not opened," shows the value of meticulous record-keeping and passing knowledge across generations. In work or family, write down procedures, passwords, emergency contacts, so others can continue when you're gone. The community's plaque, "In memory of Lena Harper and Harper Night," remind us of civic duty. When someone goes missing or domestic violence occurs, don't ignore it. Call 911, note the time, license plates, unusual sounds here, a car door, green Ford, F100 tracks, and today, pull doorbell, garage camera footage, immediately. Public agencies also learn, invest in cold case units, proper evidence storage, sealed, digitized, and lab integration. Here, the complete evidence chain DNA, items, confession, remains emerged only with funding and process discipline. Finally, Richard Harper's silence reminds us, staying silent before wrong is not innocent. Speak up early, for justice doesn't die, it only sleeps in files waiting to be awakened. Thank you for following to the end of this story, where justice was finally awakened after 35 years buried. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to join me in exploring more cases thought forgotten, but still waiting to speak their truth in upcoming episodes.